What is going on, wrestling fans? My name is Jose Ramos Jr. Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Podcast. And on today's episode, I wanted to do a little bit something different. I know typically on these episodes of the podcast, I enjoy covering a little bit of the up-to-date news regarding the world of wrestling, whether it's on Monday Night Raw, Friday Night SmackDown, AEW. But today I wanted to take a step back and really discuss a topic that I've been really thinking about for the last couple of weeks, given that I have had the opportunity to produce this pro wrestling content for a large amount of people to consume. I look at it in the sense of a pro wrestling community. At the end of the day, we are all fans of the very same source of entertainment. Now, the only discussion that really is to be made is on what side of the spectrum do you fall on. A lot of people argue about AEW. There are those who argue for the WWE, but that isn't the spectrum that I'm talking about. Of course, you've seen the title of the video. This episode is all about tribalism within the world of professional wrestling. And what do I mean by tribalism? Of course, for those who have been keeping up to date with the little war between AEW and WWE these last few years, you would know that it is that sense of association with one company or the other. There are those who are diehard WWE fans who follow the product religiously. They keep up to date with all the storylines, all the news, the history, the stars, you name it. They keep up to date with that. And then you have those who follow All Elite Wrestling in the same manner, and they like to think that one is better than the other, and I wonder why that is. I've always looked at it in the sense of a buffet. If you're not new to the channel, if you're not new and you're a regular listener to the podcast, you would know of the comparison of the buffet. There are some times when I want to enjoy a little bit of that, a little bit of this. Sometimes I want to skip out on that. And when you follow as much pro wrestling that is being provided nowadays, you will never go hungry. There's a saying that I've become a fan of, and it's a man or woman with many tastes will never go hungry. I look at it in this sense. If you're a fan of AEW, and you enjoy that they are a much more wrestling focused product. We saw just on last week's episode of Dynamite the opening matchup for the International Championship between MJF and Will Ospreay ran for 59 minutes and 58 seconds. That was just one match, the opening match of the show. And it was more wrestling than Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown had provided for audiences. We know that AEW, the slogan goes, it's where the best wrestle. That's what they want to promote. That's the image that they want others to see. And that's okay. Versus that of the WWE, who have been known to be much more on the sports entertainment aspect. They like to dramatize their stories. It is a very story driven first, and then of course there's wrestling involved. It's a little bit of a balance between the two worlds. Me personally, I look at the sense of tribalism, and where does it really come from? I think in the sense of even sports teams. Why do we devote ourselves to sports teams? Because we want to be a part of something. I think it's that feeling of belonging to a like-minded group, a like-minded community that we all can feel comfortable in. This goes all the way back to the times of the territories, I think. You'll look at how in pro wrestling, you had your territories in Texas with the Von Erichs, in the Florida, then you had the Briscoes. Of course, you would have Atlanta with WCW, that's where it was founded. You would have Jim Crockett Promotions. Then up in the northeast side of the country, that's where you had your McMahons. There was a little bit of everything for everyone, and it was that sense of pride in that community. Then the WWE would branch out and become one of the biggest companies, not only just in pro wrestling, but in combat sports, really, and that we had seen. In that time, you would see the styles begin to clash. Down south, professional wrestling was seen as sport. It was seen as a legitimate competition. It was all about the athleticism between the two combatants, or however many individuals were involved in the matchup. Whereas Up north in the WWE, very sports entertainment drawn. They focus more on the glitz, the glamour. It was much Hollywood in the sense of its presentation. You look at in WCW. Again, Jim Crockett Promotions, when it evolved into WCW, they focused more in ring. You didn't have a lot of entertainment, a lot of story driven until the mid 90s when Nitro was introduced. And you saw guys like the NWO, like the evolution of Sting. That was very much as a way to compete with the WWE. When the WWE essentially ran WCW and ECW out of business, essentially, they would purchase them and they would fold into the WWE brand. There was a period in time for 20 years that there wasn't really a legitimate competition for the WWE. Yes, there was Ring of Honor. Yes, there was TNA Pro Wrestling. There was New Japan. There was NOAH. There's AAA, CMLL. A lot of other wrestling promotions to pick and choose from. But in that 20-year span, there wasn't someone of the caliber of a WCW. And that in line with the problem of what happened during those 20 years. Pro wrestling became a little bit of stagnant. It became it was routine. You knew what you were expecting. There was no one to push the WWE to their limits. Then came AEW. When All Elite Wrestling opened its doors, it provided an alternative that we had not seen for quite some time. It allowed wrestlers to have another source of income, another land of opportunity to take advantage of and to further their career essentially. With the development of AEW, not only did it allow wrestlers to have a choice on where they wanted to go, but it gave fans an opportunity to see something different, to see an alternative brand, that pro wrestling didn't all have to fall under the umbrella of the WWE stigma. And there is where the tribalism began. You had those who loved the WWE and loved the product and loved the presentation and loved everything that came with it. But then there were those, and rightfully so, I feel like I should preface, the emotions felt on both sides are valid. Because for the time being, the WWE had began to grow stale. There were those really tough years when you really couldn't watch it and enjoy it for what it was. You know, you look back at the Roman Reigns run, for example, in 2019, when Baron Corbin had dumped all the dog food on Roman Reigns. It was a tough watch. It was like, what had happened to this sport that I loved? And when AEW came around and presented it as a legitimate sport, essentially, that allowed all these fans that were turned away from the WWE to latch on to something new, to something fresh. But I think over the course of time, people have lost sight of what makes pro wrestling so damn entertaining, and it's the variety. On any given show, there's anything that you could ask for. You want comedy? It's there. You want drama? It's there. You want tension, suspense. All elements are explored in pro wrestling. So when it comes to tribalism, when it comes to that idea of one is better than the other, I do agree with the sense that we all have our preferences. Some people really enjoy that AEW is so focused on in-ring work, whereas others really enjoy the character work that the WWE focuses on. Me, myself, I personally line up with this idea. I look at the two individuals who are competing in a match, and I think, why? Why are these two competing? Why should I be invested? What is the cause of this? And what are the possible ramifications that will come out of this matchup? I personally think that no one does it better than the WWE at this point in time. The way they are able to structure a story and have it intertwined throughout a single night has proven to be second to none. Not only that, but the production value that they have is immensely better than anything we've seen. However, on the flip side, you look at All Elite Wrestling, and these guys are able to provide quality matchups regardless of what the story is entailed. They are able to provide phenomenal matchups. Again, you look back at this past week's Dynamite, MJF versus Will Ospreay, which was a controversial matchup for some reason all over the internet. It was one of those divisive topics in pro wrestling, and believe me, we have plenty of divisive topics in pro wrestling nearly every day. There were some people heading into the matchup, by the way, who were so anti MJF versus Will Ospreay because it was on free television. They think that's a pay-per-view matchup, yet when the pay-per-views come out and they have, 14 matches to a card, people say it's too long. For one, I think it's okay to have these high caliber matchups every now and then on TV because it brings you back to why we watch the television show. Because anything can happen. That's why you draw in an audience. And I think for sure we're going to end up having a sequel. We're going to have a rematch between the two, more likely at the All In event. But you look at it in this sense. If you don't like it, that's okay. That's totally fine. And I'll speak from my own personal experience when producing videos on this YouTube channel. I find that there's a lot of interesting takes towards All Elite Wrestling. Now, let me preface this in saying that I'm a fan of both. I enjoy watching the WWE. I enjoy watching All Elite Wrestling because at the end of the day, I am a fan of professional wrestling. I don't have to pick and choose one or the other. I like both. So why can't I have both? So it's really interesting and at times confusing why there are those who feel it is okay to bash one over the other. You are more than welcome to express your opinion, your thoughts on the ongoing events and storylines within the company. But there are some individuals who find it necessary that one needs to go out of business over the other. Whereas that was the problem back in 2001 when the WWE had purchased WCW and ECW. I think the more pro wrestling companies, the more promotions that are made available not only for the consumer, but for the actual athletes, that is best case scenario for pro wrestling. It allows the sport, it allows the business to thrive in so many ways, not only in attendance records, revenue, viewership, and job opportunities in general. So when I see these interesting comments who are very anti-AEW or anti-WWE, and they voice their opinions on why they're making mistakes or why the booking is terrible or why this character is boring, and there's no substance to the argument. Like I said, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but I don't see the need to have to bash another promotion or another wrestler who's in a different promotion just to elevate the one that you're arguing for. My hope is that real fans of pro wrestling can enjoy all aspects of it. There are going to be times where I think AEW is kind of falling off in terms of its promotion, in terms of its TV. That's what we saw in the last year or two. I think now they've hit a streak where they kind of found their groove. WWE, not everything is going to be a hit. I think they're doing pretty well. Their misses are coming very fewer than their hits. But that's not to say that they're perfect. On occasion, I'll watch TNA Wrestling to get something different. I'll watch New Japan every now and then. I like to check in with CMLL or AAA just because you want to keep up to date with what's going on in pro wrestling. And that's why when I think of the tribalism, I think of how divisive this sport has become. It's really, it's a shame. And you look online, and sometimes it can be a toxic community. Again, I think at its best, pro wrestling is very inclusive. You can have so many different backgrounds, cultures that are invited and involved in what this beautiful world can be. But then there's that other side where it becomes a little toxic because people feel so strongly about one promotion or one wrestler or one story or whatever in a certain way, in a certain manner. And they feel the need to voice their opinion, whether it's with or without merit, to the point where it's becoming disparaging to others. And it's like that's not fun. That's never cool. I look at it in the sense of I want to include everybody. As a pro wrestling fan, I know there are those that can resonate with this next statement. When there are those who try to, you know, make condescending remarks or put down the business itself, and they say, oh, it's fake, which I believe everyone has been told that, or they try to poo poo the world of wrestling. They're trying to tear those walls down and get to you. Why would I want to do that within my own little community? Now, granted, these aren't people who are trashing the business or the fact that it is scripted, but they're tearing down. Like, if someone was to be a fan of AEW, there are those who want to tear that down, and vice versa. If you're a fan of the WWE, they want to tear that down. The healthiest wrestling has ever been is when there are multiple sources of entertainment, of business. You look at the 80s boom. You had your Jim Crockett promotions. You had your golden era of WWE. In the 90s, you had your Monday Night Wars when it was Nitro versus Raw. Then you had ECW. And now you fast forward to today, where I mentioned all the current pro wrestling promotions that are available for the consumer, for the business owners, for the athletes. It is the healthiest, it is the most successful it has been in quite some time, if not ever. That's why I find it such a pleasure, such a blessing to have this opportunity to share my thoughts, my opinions on the world of wrestling with all of you. That's ultimately have been the goal of this YouTube channel, of this podcast, is to just establish a community in which we all can discuss our favorites, whether it's in WWE, AEW, etc., wherever the case may be. But I just find it so interesting why some people think it's okay to put down one promotion over the other. That's really the basis of it. And then you look at WWE and AEW, both are gearing up for their one of their biggest shows. With SummerSlam coming up, it's not the biggest show, but it certainly is their second biggest show of the year. And then you look at All In, Wembley Stadium, it's going to be a packed crowd. I'm expecting two great events coming out of August. I'm looking forward to it. They have been building up pretty nicely with all the storylines that are involved. Of course, there are some that aren't hitting as hard as we would like, but that's okay, because not everything is meant to be perfect. And at times, you have to be patient, you have to wait your turn, and you have to wait for it to cook. And I think that's been a main theme of pro wrestling these last few years, especially given the new regime for WWE and AEW still learning. You know, they're still going through the motions and learning the intricacies of building and sustaining a successful wrestling promotion. But I wanted to go on this episode just to voice my opinion, and I would love you guys to go ahead and voice your opinions as well in the comments. How do you feel about this sense of tribalism, of choosing one over the other and believing that one is superior over the other? Now, granted, there are times where certain episodes or certain events are better than others, but it shouldn't be at the expense of someone else's enjoyment of said promotion. I think it's cool that we all have this outlet and this opportunity to connect with one another, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on YouTube, Snapchat, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, whatever it is that you use. And we should use it to our benefit. Instead of putting people down, let's lift everybody up. That's always been my mindset. I don't know how people view it, but that's the way I've looked at it for so long. I think I can never stop talking good about pro wrestling just because of what it's meant to me, what it's meant to my life. And I know that there are others who might have just as strong opinions about it, We all have our own situations going on. We all have our own battles that we're fighting. And for me personally, it it's proven to be a great sense of relief. It's proven to be a great source of entertainment. And that's why I've stuck with it for so long. So when there's a new promotion coming around, it's like a new genre of music that you've been exposed to. And you want to learn a little bit of it. And you want to obtain as much as you can because you just love music. That's how I look at it. And I look at it in the sense that if you're going to have the opportunity to do anything, with your spare time, you want to enjoy what you enjoy. And that's what this is. Having this opportunity to talk to you guys on a daily basis, essentially. Because with the podcast, I do kind of want to talk about topics that are a little bit more broad, that everyone can jump in and talk about and express their opinions and their emotions. And then obviously throughout the week, I want to address what's going on in the daily updated news of professional wrestling, whether it's, the episodes of Monday Night Raw where I share my opinions on the main storylines, likewise with Friday Night SmackDown, AEW, NXT. We're still keeping up to date with all those daily content and the videos. Obviously the shorts have been doing well. I think I'll be focusing more on these videos on YouTube. Like I said, I can't thank you guys enough for the level of support. The love that has been coming my way is very encouraging, inspiring, and motivating to continue with this path, with this journey, if you will. A couple months back, we were talking about the goal being 1,000 subs, and we are nearing 1,300. And that the goal was 1,000 by the end of the year, but you guys completely demolished that. It's barely about to be August. So I can't thank you guys enough. Let's keep moving forward on the road to 2,000 subs. Go ahead and, if you haven't already, like, share, subscribe, comment down below. What's your thought on the current state of professional wrestling? Which event are you looking forward to the most? All In, SummerSlam? Go ahead and sound off in the comments, guys. Again, thank you all for joining me on this episode of the J Area Podcast, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you guys on next week's episode of the podcast, as well as the other videos throughout the week.